USA Warrior Stories is a not-for-profit organization designed to record, archive, and share videos of veteran stories, to help veterans make a connection with one another and to help us all better understand their sacrifices for our freedoms.
I was born in Norwood, Massachusetts. My mother was from Boston and my father from Brooklyn, and they met during World War II. And we lived in Boston just up until I was about 1 year old, and then we moved down to New York and then eventually New Jersey. So I kind of grew up in New Jersey as opposed to Massachusetts. My father was in World War II in the Army Air Corps, and he was in North Africa fighting Rommel and then in Italy for 3 or 4 years. But I have two uncles, his brothers. One was in the Navy in the Pacific, and another was in the Army in the States. I went to a 4-year Catholic men's school only called Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island. It's Dominican order. And you had to take ROTC freshman and sophomore year. It was mandatory. I do remember the briefing when they were talking about signing up for ROTC. Father Walter Heath, who was a Dominican priest, but he was a submarine captain during World War II. He basically said a good soldier spit shines the front and back of his shoes, and I still remember that to this day. Well, in ROTC, there's the way it works is if you're taking it your junior and senior year, you have to do what is called a 6-week summer camp. So that is your basic training. Right. And we went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And actually we had a unit from Vietnam who was already in Vietnam would come back, which is the 101st Airborne. They were our instructors and they were excellent. When you're in ROTC, you get to pick what is your MOS. My first choice was quartermaster, my second choice was ordnance, and my third choice was infantry. But as I like to tell the story, I can see the guys in the Pentagon looking at this piece of paper with 3 choices on, and he says, look at this infantry, look at this idiot. He put infantry down as his third choice in the middle of a 15-year war. So I got infantry. Well, the first thing you do when you're on active duty in infantry, you have to go to Fort Benning, Georgia for 3 months, what's called Infantry Officer Basic Course. Somebody asked the question, will you ever see anybody killed that you kill? And the instructor said, no, the war is a crazy time, you're in the jungle, you won't know, who's shooting at who, whatever. And basically, that's a bunch of shit, okay? But the other thing they did talk about, which I think is paramount to why I'm doing this talk today, is there was a video we showed called You Are Who You Were When. And basically the concept is that everybody's personality is developed by the time they're 5 years old. And you will have that personality for the rest of your life unless a truly emotional experience comes along. And for example, people who are born in the Depression, they'll still be counting pennies when they're in their 60s and 70s. World War II, they'll understand their freedom and the sacrifice of it. But as the middle class came along and middle class got what they wanted, their children were in the crib going, gimme, gimme, and they gave it to their child. So that generation may have felt more like you owe me something, But I think Vietnam for me was a truly emotional experience, and that was something that changed Jerry Hughes, So, and I think that's the same for a lot of guys who went to war, No matter what war it is. It doesn't have to be Vietnam. It could be World War II, Afghanistan, Iraq. So. But going back to Fort Benning, 3 months we graduated. I will tell you a funny side story. Myself and 2 or 3 other Irish guys sat out almost every night and drank a little beer, or we went to the officers club and had a beer or 2, and would sit out in the back and shine our boots and BS. And I even missed PT in the morning twice because of that. And to include the day before graduation, I overslept, and the company was down there, and the student company commander came up and said, Hughes, you want to graduate with this class? And I was laying in bed. I could hear him down there. I said, sir, I can hear everything you're saying. Get the F out of bed. Get up. So who went up on the stage that day to collect the highest award for the physical fitness test? Yours truly, after drinking for 3 months and partying and sleeping through PT. So I was in shape in those days. Then I went to jump school for 3 weeks, became a paratrooper, and that was another motivating thing there was $110 a month. You know, I came from middle class America, you know, $47 a month ROTC, $110 a month extra on top of your pay. It was good money. I had never flown before. First 5 times I was in an airplane, I jumped out, and I'm flying home to Newark, New Jersey, and we're landing, about to land. I said to the gal next to me, an older gal in her 60s, I said, "What's it like landing in these?" "Oh, you've never flown before?" "Yes, I've just never landed before," you know. So, but I went from jump school to Fort Bragg, and Major Stilwell. He was General Stilwell from World War II's grandson, I believe. And he was there when there were 3 other guys with me who just finished jump school. And he said, "I only have 1 jump slot with the 7th Special Forces." And I said, "I'll take it." These 2 guys didn't speak up because I knew it was $110 a month. And that's how I got into the Green Berets. I became a Green Beret, not necessarily that day when I went across the street, but I went to school for it and went to 3 months Special Warfare School at Fort Bragg and became a qualified Green Beret. And I got my orders for Vietnam, and they came in June of '69. I called the Pentagon because every officer has a representative at the Pentagon, and I said, "Does this guarantee me I'm going to get into the 5th Special Forces?" He said, "No, not necessarily in June. You have a better chance in September." So I said, "Okay, put me down for September." And finished up my tour there, went on a 30-day leave, and went over with 18 Berets to Vietnam. And General Abrams was the commander in September of '69. And he didn't like Special Forces. He was trying to do away with them and cut them back. So he sent us all to line outfits. Only 3 of the 18 got the 5th Special Forces, and the other balance got infantry platoons like myself. So I wound up running a infantry platoon for the 196th Light Infantry Brigade. So. Well, it's a 1-year tour. Normally for officers, you do 6 months in the field and 6 months in a rear job, you know, whatever the rear job might be. But I was given an opportunity to go to Chulai and be the division commander's aide, one of his aides. And I said, "No, I'm not going to leave my men. The Army spent a lot of money training me. I want to stay in the platoon." So I stayed in the platoon for 10 months out in the field as an infantry platoon leader. The 196 was located in I Corps. The AMERICAL division, which is an Army division, had about 10,000 guys in it, and it had 3 brigades, the 196th, the 198th, and the 11th Brigade. And they were spread all in I Corps. We were the northernmost brigade, the 196th. The only people above us, militarily-wise, was the Marines in Hue and Da Nang, in that area. We were just a little south of Da Nang. So the AO was mostly rice paddies and mountains. And so we did a lot of daily patrols and night ambushes. That was pretty much our operation. We did not have any, you know, company attacking a Hamburger Hill kind of scenario, thank God. But we had plenty of booby traps and plenty of night ambushes and that type of thing, you know. Platoons normally rotated, maybe two platoons went out a day and one stayed wherever you were. We stayed on a hill, on a mountain, for lack of a better word, called Hill 251. But we stayed on that for 5 months but did patrols off of that, you know, and night ambushes off of that. So we were on a day patrol somewhere in I Corps. You know, I couldn't tell you what province it was in, but I couldn't even tell you what month it was in, you know. So I do know that the Girl Scout cookies in the photo were from my mother-in-law, my ex-mother-in-law, who has passed away. But we always enjoyed getting mail from home, like in people in any war. So, in fact, I have all my father's World War II letters that he sent to my mother, and they're in a wooden box, and that's going to be my next book if I ever get to it, Mom, is writing about those letters, you know. One of the things that changed me drastically during my tour in Vietnam was the death of one of my platoon members. And he was from Utah. His name is Soupy, his nickname. The company had moved by helicopter to a location that we had never been to before, and it was right outside a regional force, a Vietnamese regional force. And I was the first platoon going in, so we secured the LZ. It was what they call a cold LZ. No, we weren't under fire when we landed, but we were.
And what is an LZ?
A landing zone.
Got it.
And we were within 500 yards of what's called an RF fort, which is a regional force. It's a South Vietnamese, like National Guard post, for lack of a better word. Anyway, I thought it was a safe area, and we wait for the company to come in by chopper. Everybody came in, no issues, and I give the command to move out, and we move up a sandy trail, and we don't go but 25 yards or so, and there's a loud explosion. And I thought, since it was just one explosion, I thought it was maybe incoming mortar round, that whatever, but it turned out to be a booby trap that my point man, my squad leader, myself, and my RTO had all walked over. And one of us must have triggered it off. But Soupy was the next in line. He was the M60 machine gun, and his assistant, an FNG, which is a new guy, was behind him. I believe his name was Elliot. And the explosion, Soupy caught a piece of shrapnel right in his throat, and eyes rolled back, and he basically died on the spot. And the assistant gunner had much damage to his groin and legs and what have you. So we called the helicopter in, and it came. We put Soupy on the same chopper with the wounded soldier, which you're not supposed to do. Basically, it's not good for the morale of the wounded soldier, but he was still screaming as we put him on in pain, and they took him away. And I went back to see the company commander, who was back in the middle of the march, and he had a papasan who actually was an MVA soldier who came over in Chu Hoid, which means he became a friendly to the U.S. And papasan took me back to the beginning of the trail, and there were crossed logs, and we had missed it. It was a signal to tell the local people, or the local Vietcong, Vietnamese communists, that the trail was booby trapped. And we had all, even though we had trained for that stuff in the United States and in Vietnam before getting there, we all missed it. And as I've said many times, war is not a perfect science, and shit happens, and we paid dearly for our mistake. But I decided that day, that minute really, once we got Soupy out there, whatever, that for me, you're going to die when you're going to die, okay? And I'm now 79 years old. You look back on those times, I'm thankful that I'm still here. We moved on out. Everybody was pissed off. As I've said, I'm still pissed about the whole thing, because I lost one of my men. But as we're moving, within an hour, we came across about 4 football fields away, maybe more, 10 Asian soldiers in green uniforms, and they could have been the enemy, they could have been friendly. It wouldn't have mattered. If they were any closer, we would open fire on them. That's how mad we were. And it almost could have been another My Lai. It didn't, of course. We didn't fire, but they were too far away. But that's how mad everybody was, and that's what war does to you, and that's the day Soupy died. I then went back to the rear, with our brigade battalion rear called Hawk Hill, and I was the company XO and the assistant S3 of Air, which is in the S3 operations department. So I did that for a month and a half, and one of the platoons hit a booby trap, and the platoon leader was wounded, and so the battalion XO called me in and said, "Hughes, get your S together, you're going back out in the field." So after being in the field 10 months and making it, I had to go back out again for 3 weeks. So that was a pucker factor, to say the least. So your obligation in ROTC, if I can back up for a second, is 2 years active duty and 4 years reserve. Not that there weren't guys in my ROTC class who had the same commitment and went to law school and never saw a day of military service, but overlooking that, I still had a 4-year reserve obligation. And I was home from Vietnam, good Catholic marriage. My wife got pregnant and she was due 9 months from the honeymoon, and so she's in about month number 6, and I got a call from a major in the reserves that says you're got to go on 2 weeks active duty in June. I said, no, I don't. I says, my wife's pregnant, I'm not going. He says, oh, you got to go. I said, what are you going to do, send me to Vietnam? I've already been there. I mean, that was the attitude you had in those days, you know. So they let me skate for a year in the reserves. And then they got me the 2nd year, and I had to put in the 3 more years for my total of 6 obligation. And then the last day of the 6, our division general, the 78th Division General in New Jersey, General McElroy says, Jerry, take a ride down to Seagirt and just check out that reserve unit down there. They need an instructor. And I said, sir, I'm getting out. You know, I was just talking about going back into the business world full time and not doing any Army stuff anymore. And he says, well, just take the day off and go down there. And of course, I drive onto this post. It's on the beach and it's gorgeous, gorgeous, you know, Jersey Shore. And I said, okay, and I wound up staying in another 7 years. So I got out as a major. So when you total up those years, I was only in 15 years, and I still to this day tell the young kids, stay in the 20, because I got out when I was like 36. And I'm going, I'm never going to be 62, you know, for retirement purposes, you know. And if I had stayed in 5 more years, I'd probably have another $2,000 a month in my checking account right now, you know, from retirement pay. I don't recall any personal animosity that a lot of vets have spoken about, and it did go on. I'm not going to say it didn't. It sure did go on, but it converses today. A couple of thoughts. One is, I was in New York City when they had the welcome home from Desert Storm, and a buddy of mine was a banker. We were right on Broadway, I think, and looking out his window, and there were thousands of guys walking on the parade, and hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers cheering them and welcoming them home. That was, you know, and they did let some Vietnam vets walk with them, which was pretty cool. So, you know, I was starting to get a catharsis a little bit, but my real catharsis came in June of 1986 when Chicago had a welcome home parade. And that's when I met one of the first guys who was in country with me in my platoon, Frenchie Kostanko, who lived in Chicago. And that was 200,000 people marching, troops, Vietnam vets, and another 500,000 of Chicago people welcoming them home and cheering and throwing ticker tape and what have you. A lot of guys weren't lucky enough to have that Chicago parade in 1986. So, you know, they took them to the 90s to get their head straight a little bit.
There were repeated comments of long overdue, as the Vietnam Veterans Memorial was dedicated in Washington today, and thousands of Vietnam veterans marched on Constitution Avenue.
The first visit to the wall is kind of heavy, but when you're looking up names, you know, you can go trying to find them and finally find them. And to this day, I remember, it was so crazy because there were thousands and thousands of people. I remember at the wall in November of 1982, the father is saying, take a picture, take a picture. And whoever is on the wall, his brother is saying, what are you talking about? This is so sad. So that wall affects everybody differently, you know, so.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial is now dedicated.
Like I was talking about living on the edge of the envelope, I drank from 1970 when I got home from Nam till 1995. And in that interim, I had 2 DWIs. I'm sure I'm not alone on that, guys. And I'm sitting in my hospital bed from my second heart attack. My first heart attack. And I'm saying, am I really happy in this 30-year profession that I picked, in this 20-year significant other relationship? And the answer to both questions were no. And 60 days later, I closed my office and moved to Key West, where I had vacationed before and really fell in love with it. And that's what brought me to Key West, basically. So, and the place has saved my life. I don't say that lightly. The sun shines all the time. It's not depressing like New York, New Jersey from November to May with gray skies and cold weather and, you know, what have you. So, very happy here. And it's a great community. So, yeah, I do think it's important to share, only because, you know, like only 1% of the nation serves in the military. I think, you know, I think today there's a lot of people don't even know anybody was in the military. I mean, that's crazy as that sounds, but it takes a special person to be in that 1%. And once you're in it, it's like a brotherhood. And I think what you guys are doing with the USA Warrior Stories is another catharsis for the vet to, even if he doesn't want to, if he talks about it, he may be pleasantly surprised that it's going to be good for him to talk about it, you know. And truthfully, in 2000, I wrote extensively about the war. You know, that's 25 years ago now. So I was in my early 50s. It took me to my early 50s, even though I got out when I was 23 from Vietnam. It took me 30 years to write about the war, but that was a good catharsis for me. And I do think speaking out loud about one's experiences in the war is also a good catharsis for the next person.